The Great Hall of the Litheran Palace was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy. Giant pillars of white crystal rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves. Thousands of nobles from 100 different worlds stood in their finest clothes. They had come to witness history. Empress Valora sat on her throne made of pure starlight. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes glowed like twin moons. She was old by human standards, nearly 400 years, but for a Litheran, she was in the prime of her rule. Today should have been a day of joy. Today, her only daughter would find a husband. Princess Sarah stood beside her mother's throne. She kept her hands hidden inside the long sleeves of her royal gown. Her face showed no emotion, but inside, her heart was breaking. She already knew what would happen. She had known for years. The silver veins on her skin told everyone what she was. Cursed, broken, unwanted. The condition was called the fading. It appeared in 1 out of every million Litharan births. Silver lines spread across the skin like cracks in old glass. The ancient texts said it was a punishment from the gods. They said anyone who married someone with the fading would bring doom to their entire bloodline. It was all nonsense, of course. Modern Litharan science had proven there was nothing dangerous about the condition. But tradition was stronger than truth. Fear was stronger than facts. The first suitor stepped forward. He was a prince from the Vorton Empire, tall and covered in golden scales. His people controlled the largest trading routes in the eastern spiral arm. A marriage to him would bring great wealth to Lithara. The Vorton prince looked at Princess Sarah. His eyes moved to her hands, where the silver veins were most visible. His face twisted in disgust. "I must respectfully withdraw," he said. His voice echoed through the silent hall. "My advisors have concerns about compatibility." He turned and walked away without another word. Empress Valora's fingers tightened on her throne. This was only the beginning. The second suitor was a warrior chief from the Krell Dominion. His people were known for their strength and honor. Surely he would not be afraid of an old superstition. But he too looked at the princess's silver veins. He too made an excuse. He too walked away. One by one they came, one by one they left. The third suitor spoke of political complications. The fourth mentioned health concerns. The fifth did not even bother with an excuse. He simply laughed and shook his head. Princess Sarah stood perfectly still through all of it. She had learned long ago not to show pain. Showing pain only made others feel powerful. She would not give them that satisfaction. But each rejection was like a knife, and there were so many knives. In the back of the great hall, a small group of humans watched in silence. They were a minor delegation, invited only because of a recent trade agreement. No one expected them to participate. Humans were still new to galactic politics. Their species had only discovered faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago. They were considered primitive by most standards. Kang Tae-woo stood among them. He was 32 years old, with black hair and calm eyes. He had been a soldier once, before he became a diplomat. He had seen war and death and cruelty, but he had never seen anything quite like this. He watched as the nobles rejected the princess. He saw the way they looked at her with fear and contempt. He saw the way she stood there, taking it all, refusing to break. Something inside him began to burn. "This is barbaric," whispered Captain Yoon Hana beside him. She was his superior, the commander of their ship. "They are treating her like she has a disease," Tae-woo replied quietly. "Or something worse." The 15th suitor walked away, then the 16th. The great hall grew more and more uncomfortable. Even the nobles who had come to watch were starting to look away in shame. Finally, there was only one suitor left, a prince from the Zalari Federation. He was the last hope. The Zalari prince approached the throne. He was handsome by Aean standards, with smooth purple skin and 4 graceful arms. He looked at Princess Sarah for a long moment. Then he laughed. "You cannot be serious," he said to the Empress. "You expect me to bind my noble house to that?" He pointed at Sarah's hands. "My father would disown me. My people would revolt. I would rather marry a common servant." He turned his back and walked toward the exit. His laughter echoed off the crystal walls. The hall fell completely silent. Empress Valora sat frozen on her throne. Her face had turned pale. For 400 years she had ruled with strength and wisdom. She had defeated enemies and built alliances, but she could not protect her own daughter from this. Slowly the Empress rose to her feet. Her voice came out broken, barely above a whisper, but in the silence everyone heard her. "Is there no one?" she said. Her proud mask finally cracked. Tears rolled down her blue cheeks. "In this entire galaxy, is there no one who wants my daughter?" The silence stretched on and on. 1,000 nobles stood in the great hall. Not one of them moved. Princess Sarah closed her eyes. This was it. The final humiliation. She wished she could disappear. She wished she had never been born. Then footsteps broke the silence. They were soft at first, then louder. Someone was walking forward. The crowd began to murmur in confusion. Kang Tae-woo walked down the center of the great hall. His heart was pounding, but his steps were steady. He could feel thousands of alien eyes on him. He could feel his own people staring at his back in shock. He did not stop until he stood before the throne. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He did not bow to the Empress. Instead, he turned to face Princess Sarah. He looked into her golden eyes, and he bowed deeply to her. "Your Highness," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "I would be honored to stand beside you, if you would have me." The hall exploded in whispers. A human? A primitive, short-lived human? This was either a joke or an insult. It had to be. But Tae-woo did not move. He stayed in his bow, waiting for the princess's response. Sarah stared at him. She did not understand. Was he mocking her like the others? But when she looked at his face, she saw no mockery. She saw no fear or disgust. She saw only steady, quiet courage. "Why?" she whispered. It was the only word she could manage. Tae-woo straightened and met her eyes. "Because you deserve better than this," he said simply. "And because someone needed to step forward." The Empress looked at this strange human with new eyes. He was small compared to the other suitors. His lifespan was barely 100 years. His people had no great fleets or ancient bloodlines. He was the only one who had stayed. The great hall remained in chaos long after the ceremony ended. Nobles gathered in small groups, whispering behind their hands. The news spread through the palace like fire. A human had offered to marry the cursed princess. It was the strangest thing anyone had ever seen. Empress Valora sat alone in her private chamber. Her advisors had argued with her for hours. Some said she should reject the human immediately. Others said she should accept him, if only to save face. None of them could agree. The Empress rubbed her temples. She had not slept. She had not eaten. Her mind kept returning to the same question. What should she do with this human? A knock came at her door. Her chief advisor entered with a worried expression. "The High Lord Morath requests an audience," he said. Valora's jaw tightened. Morath was one of the most powerful nobles in the Empire. He controlled vast territories and commanded a private army. She could not refuse him. "Send him in," she said. High Lord Morath entered the chamber with a cold smile. He was tall and thin, with sharp features and calculating eyes. He moved like a snake, smooth and dangerous. "Your Majesty," he said with a bow that was barely respectful. I come to offer my support in this difficult time. Your support, Valora repeated flatly. And what form would this support take? Morath spread his hands. I simply wish to point out that there is another option. My nephew, Lord Varn, is still unmarried. He would be willing to take the princess as his bride. The alliance would strengthen your throne considerably. The Empress understood perfectly. Morath had been trying to place his family closer to the crown for decades. A marriage to Sarah would give him exactly what he wanted. Your nephew refused my daughter 3 years ago, Valora said coldly. He called her a monster. People change, Your Majesty. Circumstances change. Surely this is better than binding the royal bloodline to a primitive human. Valora stared at him for a long moment. She saw the greed behind his polite words. She saw the danger he represented. But she also knew he was right about one thing. Accepting a human would make her look weak. I will consider your offer, she said carefully. But first, I must deal with the human. Morath bowed again. Of course, I am certain Your Majesty will make the wise choice. After he left, Valora made her decision. The next morning, Kang Tae-woo was summoned to the throne room. He came alone, wearing his simple diplomatic uniform. The room was filled with nobles who wanted to watch him be humiliated. Empress Valora looked down at him from her throne. Her face was a mask of stone. Human, she said, you have made a bold offer, but marriage to my daughter is not given freely. It must be earned. Tae-woo nodded. He had expected something like this. What must I do? You must complete the 3 trials of Lithara, the Empress announced. These trials have been used for 10,000 years to test those who wish to join the royal bloodline. They test strength, wisdom, and honor. Whispers filled the room. The 3 trials were legendary. They were designed for the strongest warriors in the galaxy, creatures with natural armor and psychic abilities, beings who could lift mountains and survive in the vacuum of space. A human had no chance. Tae-woo remained calm. And if I complete these trials, then you will have proven yourself worthy, the Empress said. You will marry my daughter with my blessing. And if I fail? Valora's expression did not change. Most who fail do not survive to ask that question. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for the human to back down. Surely he would see reason now. Surely he would give up. Tae-woo stood quietly for a moment. He thought about his life back on Earth. He thought about his family, his friends, everything he might lose. Then he thought about the princess standing in that hall, enduring rejection after rejection with silent dignity. I accept, he said. The nobles gasped. Even the Empress looked surprised. You understand that no human has ever attempted these trials? She asked. I understand. You understand that you will likely die? I understand. Valora studied him with new interest. This human was either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. The trials will begin in 3 days. Use your time wisely. Tae-woo bowed and left the throne room. Behind him the nobles burst into excited chatter. They were already placing bets on how quickly he would die. That night, Princess Sarah found the human in the palace gardens. He was sitting on a bench, looking up at the stars. She approached quietly, her silver-veined hands hidden in her sleeves. Why are you doing this? She demanded. Tae-woo turned to look at her. In the starlight, her silver veins seemed to glow softly. He thought they looked beautiful, though he did not say so. Doing what? He asked. This foolishness. Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. The trials will kill you. Do you understand that? They are designed to break creatures far stronger than you. I understand. Then why? She stepped closer, her eyes burning. What do you want? Power? Glory? Are you using me to make a name for yourself? Tae-woo shook his head slowly. None of those things. Then what? What possible reason could you have? He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Where I come from, we have a saying. It goes something like this. The measure of a person is not how they treat the powerful, but how they treat those who have nothing to offer them. Sarah frowned. What does that mean? It means that I saw how they treated you in that hall. I saw how they looked at you, like you were worthless, like you were less than nothing. Taewoo's voice was soft but firm. No one deserves that. I do not know you. I do not know if we will ever be more than strangers. But I could not stand there and watch you be thrown away. Sarah stared at him. She had expected lies. She had expected tricks and hidden motives. She had not expected this. You are a fool, she said finally. Probably. You will die in the trials. Maybe. And you still will not back down? Taewoo smiled slightly. My grandmother used to tell me that stubbornness is the greatest human gift. She also said it would get me killed someday. I suppose we will find out if she was right. Sarah did not know what to say. She had spent her whole life being rejected and feared. She had built walls around her heart so thick that nothing could get through. But this strange human confused her. His kindness felt dangerous. His courage felt threatening. Because if she let herself believe in him, she would have to face something even more frightening than rejection. She would have to face hope. If you survive, she said quietly, I will have many questions for you. Then I will do my best to survive, Taewoo replied. They sat together in the garden, watching the stars. Neither of them spoke, but for the first time in many years, Princess Sarah did not feel completely alone. In his private chambers, High Lord Morath received a message from his spy. The human had accepted the trials. Morath smiled his cold smile and began to plan. If the human would not fail on his own, then Morath would make sure he failed. One way or another, the cursed princess would be his, and with her, the throne would follow. The game had only begun. The first trial took place at dawn. Thousands of spectators gathered around the ancient arena. They had come to watch the human die. Some brought food and drinks, treating it like a festival. Others simply wanted to see what would happen when a primitive species faced true danger. Kang Taewoo stood at the entrance of a massive stone doorway. Beyond it lay the labyrinth of echoes. The maze was not just a physical challenge, it was a psychic weapon. The walls were made of a special crystal that amplified fear and despair. Warriors who entered would face their deepest terrors made real. Lithuanian champions survived by using their natural mental shields. They could block out the psychic attacks and focus on finding the exit. But humans had no such ability. They were mentally naked. He will not last 10 minutes, a noble said loudly enough for everyone to hear. His mind will break like glass. Taewoo ignored the comments. He took a deep breath and stepped into the labyrinth. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world changed. The walls seemed to close in around him. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision. Voices whispered terrible things in his ears. You are nothing. You are weak. You will fail. Everyone you love will die. Taewoo kept walking. His heart pounded in his chest, but his feet did not stop. The visions began. He saw his mother's face, twisted in disappointment. He saw his father's grave. He saw his childhood home burning, while he stood frozen, unable to move. These are not real, he told himself. These are lies. But the labyrinth adapted. It found older memories, darker memories. It found the faces of soldiers who had died under his command. It found the screams of battles he had tried to forget. Taewoo stumbled. The weight of guilt and grief pressed down on him like a mountain. He wanted to curl up on the floor and give in. He wanted it to stop. Then he remembered his grandmother. She had survived a war when she was young. She had lost everything and everyone she loved. but she had kept going. Every night, when the memories became too heavy, she would sing. Old songs from her childhood, simple melodies that carried her through the darkness. Taewoo opened his mouth and began to sing. His voice was rough and unsteady at first, but as he sang, something strange happened. The psychic pressure began to ease. The visions flickered and faded. The labyrinth could not hold on to him when his mind was anchored to something real. He sang the songs his grandmother had taught him. Songs about mountains and rivers. Songs about seasons changing and children playing. Songs about hope, surviving in hopeless times. Step by step, he moved through the maze. The labyrinth threw everything it had at him. It showed him death and destruction. It showed him a future where he failed, and everyone suffered. But Taewoo kept singing, and he kept walking. After 3 hours, he emerged from the exit. His face was pale, and his body was shaking. But he was alive. He was whole. The crowd fell silent in disbelief. No one had expected this. Princess Sarah watched from the royal balcony. Her hands were pressed against the railing so hard that her knuckles turned white. When Taewoo walked out of the labyrinth, she felt something she had not felt in years. Relief. The second trial came 2 days later. This time, Taewoo faced the Beast of Korath. The creature was brought into the arena in chains. It was enormous, nearly 3 times the size of an elephant. Its body was covered in thick scales that could stop any weapon. Its jaws could bite through steel. For centuries, Latharan champions had defeated it through brute strength, wrestling it into submission. His human body was soft and fragile compared to the beast. High Lord Morath watched from his private box with a satisfied smile. He had made sure the beast was extra hungry. He had made sure it was extra angry. There was no way the human could survive this. The chains were released. The beast roared and charged. Taewoo ran. The crowd laughed. The human was a coward. This was exactly what they expected. But Taewoo was not running away. He was running toward something. There were old structures in the arena, pillars and archways from ancient times. He had spent the past 2 days studying them. He had noticed that some of the stones were loose. He had noticed that certain pillars were weaker than others. The beast chased him around the arena. Each time it got close, Taewoo would dodge at the last moment, using the structures as obstacles. He was fast and unpredictable. The beast grew more and more frustrated. Then Taewoo led it exactly where he wanted. He sprinted toward a crumbling archway, passing through it just as the beast lunged. The creature crashed into the ancient stones. The impact shook the entire structure. Cracks spread across the pillars. Taewoo grabbed a loose stone and threw it at the beast's head. It was not enough to hurt the creature, but it made it angry. The beast roared and charged again. This time, Taewoo stood his ground. He waited until the last possible second, then dove to the side. The beast hit the damaged archway at full speed. The structure collapsed. Tons of stone fell onto the creature, trapping it beneath the rubble. The beast was not dead, but it could not move. It could not fight. The trial was complete. The crowd sat in stunned silence. This was not how champions won. This was not strength or honor. Something else. Adaptation, Captain Yoon Hana said to herself, watching from the human section. He used his brain when his body was not enough. The third trial was the most dangerous. The Blood Oath was a duel against a Litharan champion. The fight would continue until one warrior yielded or died. High Lord Morath made sure his nephew, Lord Varn, was chosen as the champion. Varn was a killer. He had won dozens of duels and shown mercy to none. The 2 fighters entered the arena. Varn was twice Taewoo's size, with natural armor plating covering his body. He carried a curved blade designed to cut through bone. Taewoo had only a simple sword. The duel began. Varn attacked with brutal efficiency, his blade singing through the air. Taewoo dodged and blocked, but each impact sent shockwaves through his arms. He could not match Varn's strength. He could not match his speed. Within minutes, Taewoo was bleeding from a dozen cuts. His movements were slowing. The crowd watched in grim satisfaction. This was the end they had expected. Varn knocked Taewoo to the ground. He stood over the human with his blade raised, ready to deliver the killing blow. "Any last words, primitive?" Varn sneered. Taewoo looked up at him. Then slowly he placed his sword on the ground. "I yield," he said. Varn hesitated. This was unexpected. In the blood oath, yielding meant admitting complete defeat. It meant surrendering all honor. But Taewoo was not finished. He turned his head toward Princess Sarah, still kneeling in the dirt. "I did not come here to kill," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I came here to protect. I yield not to Lord Varn, but to the princess I wish to serve. My life is hers to command." The ancient words echoed through the arena. Scholars in the crowd suddenly sat up straight. They recognized what was happening. According to the oldest laws of Lithara, a yield in the blood oath was not just a surrender. It was a sacrifice. If a warrior yielded his life to another person, not to his opponent, it created a bond deeper than conquest. A bond of absolute loyalty. The trial was fulfilled, not through victory, but through devotion. Lord Varn stood frozen with his blade in the air. He had won the fight, but somehow he had lost something far more important. High Lord Morath's face twisted with fury. The human had slipped through his fingers again. In the royal balcony, Empress Valora stared at Kang Taewoo with new eyes. She had ruled for 4 centuries. She had seen warriors of legend and conquerors of empires, but she had never seen anything quite like this. A human who won not by being stronger, but by being different. Princess Sarah's hands trembled as she watched Taewoo struggle to his feet. He was covered in blood and barely able to stand, but he had survived. For her, the impossible had happened. The human had passed the 3 trials of Lithara, and nothing would ever be the same again. High Lord Morath stood in his private chambers, surrounded by his most loyal followers. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. The human had ruined everything. 3 trials, 3 chances to remove the obstacle, and still the primitive creature lived. "My lord," one of his advisors said nervously, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The human has proven surprisingly capable." Morath silenced him with a look. "The human has proven nothing except that luck favors fools, but luck runs out. We simply need to change our strategy." He walked to his window and looked out at the palace. Tomorrow, the formal engagement ceremony would take place. Once the human was officially bound to the princess, Morath's plans for the throne would crumble. Unless he acted now. "Send word to our allies," Morath said quietly. "Tell them to prepare their soldiers. If we cannot stop this marriage through proper channels, we will stop it through other means." The advisors exchanged worried glances, but did not dare argue. High Lord Morath had risen to power through cunning and ruthlessness. Those who opposed him had a habit of disappearing. The next morning, Kang Taewoo woke to find Captain Yoon Hana standing at his bedside with a serious expression. "We have a problem," she said. Taewoo sat up slowly. His body was still recovering from the trials. Every muscle ached, and the cuts on his arms had only just begun to heal. "What kind of problem?" Hana handed him a small device. "Our communications officer intercepted these transmissions last night. They were heavily encrypted, but we managed to break through." Taewoo listened to the recordings. His face grew darker with each passing moment. The messages were between High Lord Morath and several other nobles. They discussed plans for a coup. They talked about assassinating the Empress. They talked about making it look like the human was responsible. They are planning to move today, Hana said. During the engagement ceremony, maximum chaos, maximum witnesses. Taewoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, ignoring the pain in his body. We need to warn the Empress. Already done. I sent a message to her chief advisor an hour ago. Hana paused. There is no response yet. Either they did not believe us, or the message was intercepted. Then we go in person. Getting an audience with the Empress was not easy. The guards did not trust humans, especially a human who had caused so much disruption. But Taewoo was persistent. He refused to leave the palace gates until someone listened. Finally, they were allowed inside. But instead of the Empress, they found High Lord Morath waiting for them in the throne room. Ah, the primitive and his captain, Morath said with a cold smile. I heard you were causing trouble at the gates, spreading lies about loyal nobles. They are not lies, Taewoo said firmly. We have evidence of your conspiracy. Morath laughed softly. Evidence? You mean those transmissions you intercepted? How convenient that a human ship just happened to catch encrypted Litharan communications. It almost sounds like you fabricated them. We did not. Of course you did not. Morath's smile widened. But who do you think the court will believe? A respected lord with centuries of service to the Empire? Or a primitive species that has only been in space for 200 years? Before Taewoo could respond, the doors of the throne room burst open. Soldiers in Morath's colors poured in, surrounding the humans with weapons drawn. I had hoped to do this more quietly, Morath said, but you forced my hand. Guards, arrest these humans for treason against the Empire. They have been caught attempting to sabotage the royal engagement. Taewoo and Hana were grabbed by the soldiers. There was no point in resisting. They were outnumbered and outmatched. Take them to the holding cells, Morath ordered. The Empress will deal with them after the ceremony. Or rather, after I deal with the Empress. The engagement ceremony began at midday. The Great Hall was packed with nobles from across the galaxy. Empress Valora sat on her throne, looking tired and worried. Princess Sarah stood beside her, dressed in ceremonial robes that could not hide the silver veins on her hands. The mood was tense. Everyone had heard rumors about the human being arrested. No one knew exactly what was happening. Morath approached the throne with a confident stride. Your Majesty, I bring grave news. The human Kang Taewoo has been exposed as a spy. His entire courtship of the princess was a plot to destabilize the Empire. Murmurs swept through the crowd. That is a serious accusation, Valora said carefully. What proof do you have? The proof will be presented at his trial, but for now, I respectfully suggest that we cancel this engagement and proceed with a more appropriate match. Morath glanced at his nephew, who stood nearby with an eager expression. My nephew, Lord Varn, remains willing to take the princess as his bride. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes blazing. I refuse. You have no choice, princess, Morath said smoothly. The human has been exposed as a criminal. You cannot marry a criminal. The human is innocent. You are the criminal here. No one had expected the quiet princess to speak against a high lord. Morath's smile disappeared. Be careful, princess. Your condition has already made you unpopular. Do not make things worse for yourself. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. The doors flew open, and Kang Taewoo walked in, bruised and battered, but very much free. Captain Hana followed close behind, along with a squad of human soldiers. How did you escape? Morath demanded. Hana smiled grimly. Your guards were not expecting us to fight back. It seems they underestimated what humans are capable of. Taewoo walked forward until he stood before the throne. He held up a small device. Your Majesty, this contains recordings of High Lord Morath's conspiracy. Plans to assassinate you, plans to seize the throne, plans to blame everything on humans. He offered the device to the Empress. I ask only that you listen. Morath lunged forward. Do not believe his lies. This is a human trick. But Valora had already taken the device. She activated it, and Morath's own voice filled the hall. The recordings were clear and damning. Every word spoke of betrayal and murder. The nobles listened in horror. Even Morath's allies began to step away from him. Enough! Morath shouted. He drew a hidden blade and pointed at the Empress. If I cannot take the throne through politics, I will take it through force. Soldiers, to me! His private soldiers flooded into the hall. Chaos erupted as guards clashed with guards. Nobles scrambled for safety. Screams and the sounds of fighting filled the air. Morath charged toward the Empress, his blade aimed at her heart. Tae-woo moved to intercept him, but he was too far away. He would not make it in time. Then Princess Sarah stepped forward. She raised her hands, and her silver veins began to glow. The light spread across her body, growing brighter and brighter. Energy crackled around her like lightning. The fading was not a curse. It had never been a curse. It was a connection to the ancient energy network that powered all of Lithara, a gift that had been forgotten and feared for thousands of years. Sarah released the energy in a single pulse. It swept through the hall like a wave, passing harmlessly through the innocent, but striking Morath's soldiers with devastating force. They collapsed instantly, unconscious but alive. Morath himself was knocked back against a pillar. His blade clattered to the floor. He looked up at the princess with genuine fear in his eyes. "What are you?" he whispered. "I am the daughter of the Empress," Sarah said quietly, "and I am not broken." Morath tried to rise, reaching for his blade one last time. But Tae-woo was there, kicking the weapon away and pinning the traitor to the ground. "It is over," Tae-woo said. Within the hour, Morath and his followers were in chains. The coup had failed. The conspiracy was exposed. And for the first time in her life, Princess Sarah was not seen as cursed. She was seen as powerful. As the chaos settled, Tae-woo found Sarah standing alone by a window. Her hands were still glowing faintly with residual energy. She looked exhausted, but also somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "You saved us," Tae-woo said. Sarah shook her head. "You saved us first. You believed in me when no one else did." She turned to face him. For the first time, she did not hide her silver-veined hands. "When I was a child," she said quietly, "I used to dream that someone would come and see me as something other than a monster. I stopped believing that dream years ago. Thank you for making me believe again." Tae-woo smiled softly. "That is what humans do. We believe in impossible things." Outside the window, the twin suns of Lithara began to set. A new chapter was beginning for both of them, and neither knew exactly where it would lead, but for the first time, they were ready to find out together. 3 weeks had passed since the failed coup. The palace was calm again, though the echoes of that terrible day still lingered in everyone's minds. High Lord Morath awaited trial in the deepest dungeons of Lithara. His allies had fled or surrendered. The conspiracy that had threatened to tear the empire apart was finally over. Kang Tae-woo spent most of those 3 weeks in the Royal Medical Wing. His injuries from the trials and the fight had been severe. Human bodies were not as resilient as Litharan ones. They healed slowly, painfully, stubbornly. But they healed. Princess Sarah visited him every day. At first she claimed it was her duty as his future wife. Then she claimed it was simple courtesy. Then she stopped making excuses altogether, and simply came because she wanted to. They talked for hours, about their childhoods, about their fears and dreams, about the strange path that had brought them together. Tae-woo learned that Sarah loved ancient poetry and hated formal ceremonies. Sarah learned that Tae-woo had grown up on a small farm on Earth and still missed the smell of rain on fresh soil. With each conversation, the walls around Sarah's heart crumbled a little more. She had spent her whole life keeping people at a distance. It was safer that way. But Tae-woo had a gift for making her feel safe enough to be herself. Meanwhile, scientists from across the galaxy descended on Lithara to study the princess's condition. What they discovered changed everything. The fading was not a disease, it was not a curse. It was an ancient genetic adaptation that allowed certain Litharans to connect with the planet's energy network. Thousands of years ago, these individuals had been revered as leaders and healers. But over time, fear and superstition had turned reverence into rejection. With human medical perspectives added to Litharan knowledge, the researchers found ways to help others with the condition control their abilities. The silver veins, once seen as marks of shame, were now being called gifts. Young Litharans born with the fading no longer had to hide, they no longer had to feel broken, and it was all because one human had refused to look away. Empress Valora summoned Tae-woo to her private chambers on the day he was finally cleared to leave the medical wing. He walked slowly, still favoring his injured leg, but he walked with his head held high. The Empress was standing by her window when he entered. She did not turn around immediately. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. Tae-woo bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty owes me nothing. I owe you everything." Valora finally turned to face him. "I gave you impossible trials, hoping you would fail. I wanted you to fail. A human marrying my daughter seemed like the worst possible outcome." She paused. "I was wrong. You were protecting your daughter in the only way you knew how." Valora shook her head. "I was protecting my pride, my reputation. I was so afraid of looking weak that I almost let my daughter be destroyed by people like Morath." She stepped closer to him. "You showed me something I had forgotten. Strength is not about power or bloodlines. It is about standing for what is right, even when you stand alone." She reached out and took his hand. It was a gesture of profound respect in Litharan culture, reserved only for equals. "Thank you, Kang Tae-woo of Earth. Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for saving me." The wedding took place on the first day of spring by the Litharan calendar. It was the largest celebration the Empire had seen in a century. Nobles from 100 worlds gathered in the Great Hall. This time, they did not come to mock or reject. They came to witness history. They came to see something no one had ever seen before. A human marrying a Litharan princess. Tae-woo stood at the altar, in a suit that blended human and Litharan styles. Captain Yoon-hana stood beside him as his witness, looking proud and slightly emotional despite her best efforts to hide it. Then the music began, and Sarah appeared at the entrance of the hall. She wore a gown of pure white that flowed behind her like clouds. Her silver veins were not hidden. They were displayed proudly, glowing softly in the light of 1,000 candles. She looked like a goddess, walking among mortals. She looked beautiful. As she walked toward the altar, Sarah's eyes never left Tae-woo's face. She had been so afraid of this moment, afraid that something would go wrong. Afraid that he would change his mind. Afraid that she would wake up and find it was all a dream. But he was here. He was real. And he was smiling at her with such warmth that she forgot to be afraid. They joined hands at the altar. The priest began the ancient vows, speaking in both Litharan and English, so that everyone could understand. When it came time for their personal vows, Tae-woo spoke first. "You asked me once why I stepped forward that day," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I gave you an answer then, but it was not the complete truth. Sarah's heart beat faster. What is the complete truth? The truth is that I saw you standing there, enduring rejection after rejection, and something inside me broke. Not because I pitied you, but because I recognized you. I recognized the loneliness, the pain of being different, the exhaustion of always having to prove yourself to people who will never accept you. He squeezed her hands gently. On Earth, I was always the odd one, too stubborn, too idealistic, too willing to fight for lost causes. People told me I would never amount to anything, but I kept going anyway, because giving up felt worse than failing. He looked into her eyes. When I saw you, I saw someone like me, someone who refused to break, no matter how hard the world pushed. And I thought if I can stand beside her, maybe neither of us has to be alone anymore. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks, but she was smiling. That is a terrible reason to propose marriage, she said softly. Probably. Is it working anyway? She laughed, a sound like silver bells. Yes, it is working. They exchanged rings. They spoke the final vows, and when the priest declared them married, the entire hall erupted in applause. Empress Valora watched from her throne with tears in her eyes. For the first time in many years, they were tears of joy. Later that night, there was a grand celebration. Music and dancing filled the palace. Humans and Litharans mingled freely, sharing stories and laughter. The barriers between their worlds seemed smaller than ever before. Taewoo and Sarah escaped to the palace gardens, seeking a moment of quiet amid the chaos. They sat on the same bench where they had talked on the night before the trials. It feels strange, Sarah said. All my life, I prepared myself to be alone. I told myself it was better that way, safer. And now? She leaned against his shoulder. Now I am terrified, but also happier than I have ever been. Taewoo put his arm around her. I am terrified too, but my grandmother used to say that the best things in life are always a little terrifying. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She survived impossible things and came out stronger, just like you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the twin moons rise over the garden. What happens now? Sarah asked eventually. Now we build something new, something that has never existed before, a bridge between our peoples, a partnership between our worlds. Taewoo smiled. It will not be easy. There will be challenges and enemies and moments when we want to give up. But we will face them together. Together. That is what being married means, right? Sarah turned to look at him. Her golden eyes reflected the moonlight. Where I come from, marriage means many things. Politics, alliances, power. And where I come from? She reached up and touched his face gently. Where you come from, it seems to mean something much simpler and much more difficult. What is that? Love. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and fragile and full of promise. Taewoo leaned down and kissed her softly. When they finally returned to the celebration, the crowd cheered for them. Humans and Litharans raised their glasses in a toast that echoed across the galaxy. A new age was beginning, an age of understanding and cooperation, an age where being different was not a curse, but a strength. And it had all started because one human had stepped forward when everyone else walked away. In the histories that would be written about this time, scholars would debate the significance of these events for generations. Others would call it a lucky accident. But those who had been there knew the truth. It was not luck. It was not destiny. It was choice. The choice to be brave. The choice to be kind. The choice to see someone's worth when the rest of the universe refused to look. And sometimes, that choice was all it took to change everything.